Hello, Courageous Journeys. Hello, YouTube family. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. I am also sharing this live on my Courageous Journeys Facebook page, but I will only be responding, being able to pay attention to comments and questions on YouTube. So, hi, Pam. So, thank you for joining me. I would love to know who is here since on YouTube it doesn't show me who is joining me. Can everybody hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up or a wave or something if you can hear me? Hi, Barbara. Hello. It's been a while since I've done a live. Hi, Tabby. Great. Thank you for letting me know that you can hear me. So I wanted to come in and do this live today after sharing a post on Facebook about feeling, about the importance of honoring our feelings and the impact it can have on us when we don't, and how it can actually create difficulty with healing. So, hi, AJ. Um, so, feelings are tricky. Feelings are really a struggle for a lot of people for different reasons. Not only is it just about feeling different feelings, but much of it has to do with the ideas that we hold about feeling, the ideas that we hold about so-called positive and negative feelings. And we're taught these things from a very early age, and not even directly taught. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's not. It's more about kind of the implicit ways that things are discussed around us, the ways that we see people around us deal with their own feelings. Do they allow themselves to feel? Do they shut it down? Do they get angry at people when they have a feeling or emotion and they express it? Do they allow themselves to cry? All of those things that we witness as young people, especially, impact our subconscious thinking ideas of feeling. So, all of these things play a part. When you've been hurt, when you've experienced something difficult as a child, whatever that might be, it doesn't have to be about abuse, it could be any number of things. It could even be like a peer relationship that you feel hurt in. But when we experience a feeling and we are taught or told, either explicitly or implicitly, that we shouldn't feel it, that it's okay, don't cry. Certainly, the idea that boys don't cry or big boys don't cry, that for girls, often that being angry isn't acceptable. We're taught these things and we believe them. We understand that there's an expectation that those feelings aren't okay. The expression of those feelings are not okay. So we learn from a very early age that what we feel, our desire to express how we feel, the natural, actually, way of dealing with feeling by that expression, isn't really okay. Within that, and especially if you're told, oh, that's not really how you feel, or you don't really mean that, or they didn't mean that, you shouldn't feel hurt, or it was an accident, you shouldn't be upset, or whatever. But through that, we're taught that what we know that we're feeling isn't an accurate representation, isn't true. We know that it is because we're feeling it, but yet we're being told in some way or another that it's not really what we feel. There are so many examples of how that shows up, that I certainly couldn't identify all of them in this video or at all, period. But when you really think about all the different ways that we hear messages about how we feel, whether it's okay to feel, whether this time is appropriate and this time isn't, by the things that we witness around us. So many people, so many parents say, I have to be strong for my children. I can't let them see me cry. And while I understand that, it actually does not help our children, nor does it help anybody else. Certainly doesn't help us. Because what are you teaching your children if they never get to see you feel or express how you feel? They think that what they then feel isn't okay, that they should be strong too and not feel anything. So we're given these messages from every angle, from everywhere in our lives. And when you've been hurt in childhood, as an inherent, natural way of coping with strong feeling, difficult feeling, we cope with it by, in some way, shutting it down. And that can look different ways. Maybe we are in complete denial. Most often, as younger children, we just kind of rationalize it or push it to the side and say, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. Or whatever version of that might be for you. But we deny it. We minimize it. We rationalize it. In doing that, it serves a really, really important purpose in our childhood. It truly does. And there's nothing to feel ashamed of, and it's certainly not a weakness. The ability that we have as children to cope with the things that so many of us have to cope with is incredible when you really think about it. That a child on their own can find a way within themselves to deal with that, to go on with their lives, to get up every day and act as if you're okay, that nothing is hurting. That's pretty incredible. That is absolutely strength. So it serves a purpose. But like many of the coping mechanisms we develop as children, it doesn't really serve us well in our adult lives. So as children, when we are coping, and it's working for us, at least to the extent that it can, we begin to automatically react in those ways whenever there is feeling present, especially a difficult feeling. So if we learn very early on that we have to deny that we're feeling hurt, or that we're feeling sad, or that we're tearful, if we have to deny that and push it so far to the back so that we don't experience it in the moment, we're not only telling ourselves that it's not okay, that it's not safe, but we're also telling ourselves, we're telling our child brain, our child heart, that what we feel either isn't truly what we feel, or that what we feel doesn't matter. Think about that for a second. Really think about that. Think about being a child. You were one once. I know it may be hard to connect back to that, and there may be a lot of fear about connecting back to that. But for a child, to feel so much that it's overwhelming to their system, because their system doesn't know how to process it, and generally they would have to process it alone, which is impossible to do. So as a child, when we have to push that so far to the back, we are telling ourselves that how we're feeling, our natural, normal, healthy response and reaction to what's going on within us, around us, that it doesn't matter. We just have to be okay. We have to be strong. And I say that in quotes. That it's not safe to feel. And the reality is, for many people as children, it isn't safe to feel. Both internally, because if you actually felt the depth and the breadth of that pain, you wouldn't be able to get up the next day and pretend that everything is okay. But it also protects us from the even more significant impact that we would feel. So what does this mean for us as we go through our lives? One of the big things is that when we learn as young people to shut down how we feel or to mask how we feel, to instead of feeling pain in some aspect, we say, oh no, it's okay. I am grateful for that experience. Or it must happen for a reason. Or whatever it is that we might say to ourselves. But when we do that into our adult lives, it reinforces those ideas that we've long held on to. And we do it automatically because when you learn as a child that that's how you experience feeling, in part by kind of shutting it down or closing it off, we don't have the ability to compartmentalize and say, okay, I'm not going to feel any of these feelings, which are the bad feelings, but I can feel these feelings, the so-called good feelings, like joy, happiness, even gratitude or contentment, excitedness. When we numb ourselves to some feelings, on many levels, we numb ourselves to all feelings. So I'm not suggesting that you don't ever have a moment when you feel something that's more positive. But I can fairly confidently say that if you haven't been able to process and heal all this other stuff, it's fleeting. You may have those moments that come up, and I hope that you do. But it probably doesn't last very long. And why is that? That happens because your survival mechanism that helped you cope with that as a young person kicks in. It remembers that it's not safe to feel, to let others know that you feel. So we kind of numb to all feeling. And that's obviously not a healthy, good thing, and it certainly doesn't feel good either. When we, even in our adult lives, tell ourselves that you shouldn't feel something. Oh, I shouldn't be upset about that. I know they didn't mean it. Oh, I shouldn't feel worried because there's a plan for everything. There's so many different ways that we discount or deny what we're feeling, that we try to talk, a way that we try to talk ourselves out of that feeling. And every single time that we do that, it reinforces time and time again that what we feel doesn't matter or it's not real. And neither of those things are helpful. They're not true either, but they're certainly not helpful in our desire to be healthy and happy and whole. We can never be fully whole or free if we are constantly denying a significant part of our existence. To feel is to be human. The whole range of human emotions. We must allow ourselves to feel them. Otherwise, we are cutting ourselves off to so much of our humanity, so much of our ability to connect authentically with the people around us, the people that we love. It keeps us from being able to show up in our lives for ourselves and certainly for others. But I know that feeling is vulnerable. Feeling is scary, especially if you were given very explicit ideas that feeling wasn't safe, that it wasn't okay, that somehow you were weak, or that there was something wrong with you because you couldn't stop feeling something, that you were a nuisance because you felt too much. There are so many reasons that we as humans struggle with feeling. And I truly do think that all of us, no matter what our histories are, we struggle with it at times. Some of us a lot more than others. One of the reasons that we struggle with it is something that somebody brought up on this post that I shared on Facebook, is that it's kind of the idea of not really recognizing what we're feeling. I know that that's certainly true for me. Even now, sometimes I can't quite get the exact feeling that I'm looking for. I can find something close, but the word is just not coming to me. And part of that is because we're not taught what feeling even is. We're not taught the kinds of feelings that come up in different kinds of life experiences. And we're not taught that whatever it is that we're feeling is okay. As children, very often, the words that are kind of out there, and things are changing for sure. I think a lot more parents are much more aware and are doing a much better job at being able to have a conversation with their children, even very young children, being able to name feelings or even identify that they're feeling something very strongly. But for many of us, like the feelings were, I'm sad, I'm happy, or I'm mad. That was like the extent of the vocabulary that we were given for feeling. And feeling sad and mad were not okay. If you were feeling sad, oh, don't cry, or it'll be okay. If you're mad, well, then you're punished much of the time. Or you're told as a girl in particular that you're not being nice. So being able to name our feelings is something that is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And one thing that I will actually recommend, there's not a lot of specific things that I feel kind of wholehearted about in terms of recommending, but the Desire Map by Danielle Laporte is really a great, and I will try to share a link in the comments afterwards, but the Desire Map is about identifying, it's actually about identifying the core desired feelings that you want to feel in your life. But one of the things that I really like about it is that in the book, she talks a lot about how we need to live our lives from a place of knowing how we want to feel, which is kind of separate than what I'm talking about now. But within that, she identifies, like, I don't even know how many feelings she identifies, but it's a great resource for being able to identify words, finding language to describe what we might be feeling. Um, so being able to expand our vocabulary about what we're feeling, I think, is really important. And along with this, and I believe that I've done a video on this, on anger, and that underneath anger is one of two things. And so I want to briefly talk about that here. For many people, and I would say historically, and this is definitely a very generalized statement, but again, in terms of how children are raised, like I just mentioned, girls are taught that anger isn't okay. Boys are taught that anything other than anger isn't okay. That it's weak. Anything other than anger is weakness. And girls are taught that as well, but it's certainly a gender stereotype that still exists. But whenever we feel anger, especially when, I think that this is true really 99% of the time, but especially when that anger is very sudden or very intense. And the anger sometimes can be directed at ourselves, and sometimes it's directed outwards. But when we feel that anger, it's almost always secondary to feeling hurt or fear. And sometimes it's a fear of being hurt. And I know for a lot of people, when they first hear that, they think, well, no, I'm not afraid and I'm not hurt. I'm just pissed. And sometimes there can be anger that's not really closely or intensely related to hurt or fear, but most of the time, it is directly related to hurt or fear. And the fear may not be about that particular moment, but it may trigger a fear of something else. And when we can understand what is underlying that anger, then we can address the hurt or fear. We can honor the hurt or fear. We can heal the hurt or fear. So being able to understand that we feel, that it is not a weakness to feel. In fact, I actually believe that it's a sign of strength. Truly, I believe that it's a sign of strength to be able to feel what we feel in a moment. Doesn't mean that you're not strong if you can't. It just means that those coping mechanisms are incredibly powerful and they're still holding on to protect you. But the opposite of that is not weakness. The opposite of that is feeling, which takes a conscious effort. And in allowing ourselves to be conscious of that and intentional about that, that takes strength. It takes courage. So, feeling, when we can identify what we're feeling, not only does it allow us then to heal what we're actually feeling, so we can connect with what is that feeling about, where is it coming from, and then we can do the work of healing and processing that feeling, because we need to be able to process it, not just in our mind, but also in our body. When we can process it, then we are able to heal it. If we just keep pushing it back here or rationalizing it by bypassing it, by finding the gratitude in it or whatever, then we never have the opportunity to process it. So when we can process it, we can heal it. Not only do we allow ourselves an opportunity to heal it, heal the experience, heal the feeling, whatever. But when we honor the truth of how we feel, so no matter what's going on, no matter what the feeling is, when we can honor the truth of what we're feeling, we begin to connect back to our truth. We begin a connection back to being open to what our heart is feeling. Because when we tell ourselves that we're not really feeling hurt, no, that didn't bother me. No, I'm over that. No, I don't care about that. When we do that, we close our heart off. We do that to protect our heart so that we don't feel any more hurt. So when we can honor the truth of how we feel, we create the space, we create the opportunity for our heart to open a bit, to let the light in, to let the truth in, to let the compassion in for that feeling. And in doing that, we begin to be able to learn to trust ourselves, to trust what we think and what we feel in our mind, in our thoughts, and in our body. So many of us, especially abuse survivors, are so disconnected from our bodies. And there are many reasons for that. But when we feel something, we feel it physiologically, right? I know that if you really sit with it for a moment, you can recall feeling something, a time when you felt an intense emotion. And maybe you didn't know what you were feeling, but you felt it in your body. You may not have recognized it at the time, but you felt it in your body. Maybe it was a tightening in your throat, a heaviness or a constriction in your chest, nauseous, your legs tense, your heart rate increases, you start sweating, you get a headache. All of those are signs that you're feeling. Because our body naturally is designed to react to feeling. It goes back to survival, fight, flight, and freeze. So our body, whether we want it to or not, reacts. We can, the more that we experience things, we can numb our body as well. It's one of the things about dissociation that is kind of a way of coping as children, because we're disconnecting fully. So even when we consciously try not to feel, quite often, well, all the time really, whether we're recognizing it or not, our body is experiencing it. Our body is reacting. But we tell ourselves we're not feeling anything. So we're dishonoring our body. We're dishonoring our own knowing and our intuition. And when we dishonor ourselves in any way at all, it reinforces our beliefs of being unworthy. So, how do we then get to a place where we can feel safe enough to feel? Whether that's because we have an idea that feeling is weakness, or because we just don't know how to do it, because our body engages and keeps us from being able to do it. We practice. And it takes a lot of practice. It's not something that you can do for a week or even a month or even a few months and have it mastered. You can certainly make progress over a few months, but you will not have it mastered. In fact, I think that throughout our lives, it's an ongoing practice. But it is a practice. And the more that we consciously practice, the more natural it becomes, the more our body gets to experience that we are, in fact, safe. So, there are two things, and I'm going to make a note so that I don't forget. Um, Being vulnerable and connecting within. So, in terms of allowing ourselves to feel or being able to connect with what we're feeling, the practice is not just when you're feeling something that's very present for you, but even other times throughout your day. Just check in with yourself. Just take a few moments, like literally, it could be a minute. Ideally, maybe you'd give yourself a little bit more time, but checking in with yourself and asking yourself, how am I feeling? And if you don't have the words, which many of us don't, if you don't have the words for how you're feeling, check in with your body. In fact, I would still encourage you to check in with your body. What am I noticing in my body right now? And close your eyes. When you ask yourself that question, close your eyes and feel. Just notice from your hair, because sometimes you can kind of feel it, like a tingle almost at your scalp, where your hair might feel kind of heavy or electric. But from your hair all the way down to the tips of your toes, to the bottom of your feet, where in your body do you feel? What does it feel like? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like a flutter? Does it have a temperature? Does it feel cold or hot? Does it feel flowy? Like, does it feel like your breath is just moving very naturally and comfortably? Does it feel like your breath gets caught in your throat? Are your shoulders tense? Are you holding your breath? Are your muscles relaxed or are they contracted? Connecting into your body and what's happening inside of your body lets you know how you're feeling. Some feelings, like anxious, can kind of come from a more difficult place. It can also come from an excited place. But really, if you think about it, the excitement sometimes comes from an anticipation, an unknown, which, depending on how you're feeling or what it's about, can bring up either difficult feelings or more positive feelings. So, paying attention and noticing what's happening in your body can be a good indicator of how you're feeling. It can also be pretty scary if you're not used to doing it. Because one of the things that I hear so often from people is that they will feel something and it will become too overwhelming and they won't be able to manage it. And people have expressed at times that they won't be able to stop crying or they won't be able to let go of the anger, that they'll be depressed forever if they allow themselves to feel. And I can say from my experience, personally and professionally, that that has never happened. Not saying that you feel it for 2 seconds and then it's gone, but the tears do stop. The intensity of the feeling does dissipate. It calms, especially if you're very present and able to, maybe even with support, kind of work through that. But the way that we retrain our body to recognizing that feeling uncomfortable doesn't have to mean danger is by allowing ourselves, from an intentional, safe place, even if you don't feel safe, but you know that you are, from that place, allowing ourselves to feel, to be vulnerable, and come through the other side. So instead of doing what we typically do, where we have this feeling that comes up in our body or in our mind, this feeling comes up, we shut it down, it reinforces the belief, the cycle, that how we stay safe is by shutting it down. And that we just repeat that over and over again. And we learn that very early on, and we just can't continue to repeat that cycle. So our physiological being, the way that it feels safe is by shutting down. Okay, now I'm safe. Shut that down. Now I'm safe. So part of healing is feeling this feeling. And this is part of the reason that I think it's so important to have support of a professional. We feel that intensity of fear and not wanting to feel, that level of feeling unsafe, whatever that is, vulnerability. We feel that we're in a safe space. We feel that fear. We feel the feeling. We acknowledge the feeling. We honor the feeling, whatever that feeling is, whether it's anger or hurt, whatever it is. We feel that. We work through it, even just by allowing yourself to hold space and openness for this feeling. There's healing that happens in that. That by itself is a healing moment. If you are then able to process that at all, if you're able to talk about what that's about, why you're feeling that way, honoring that you're feeling that way, then you feel differently on the other side of that. You feel a release. You feel that tension in your body decrease a little bit. And then instead of this very brief cycle being repeated where you feel the fear and you shut it down and you think that you're okay, when you move through this process, you fear, you feel, and you come out the other side, you retrain your body, your physiological nervous system response. You retrain that to recognize that this fear doesn't require you to shut down, that you can actually feel and come out on the other side and be okay. And maybe more than okay. If you've been able to do that with a supportive person that can hold the space for you to feel that, not only do you feel okay, but you feel accepted, you feel safe, you feel honored. There's any number of kind of positive experiences that you can feel on the other side of that. And we need those experiences in order to heal anything. We need those experiences. We cannot heal if we don't have those experiences. So those experiences help our automatic physiological response to feeling over time. Now, the next time a strong feeling comes up, your natural inclination is going to be to do the same thing that you've always done. So we have to practice. It's an ongoing practice. We need plenty of opportunities to move ourselves through that cycle, which is part of the reason that healing takes the amount of time that it does. Because it's not just about learning a concept. Oh, okay, I get it. Now I can do that. No. Our nervous system does not work that way. Our survival mechanism does not work that way, because it will continue to do the same thing it's always done until it has enough felt experience in our body. It will not change until we've had enough experience in our body for it to recognize there's another way. So that's one of the things. And then I ended up kind of talking about within that the second piece that I wanted to address, which is the being vulnerable piece. So when the feeling comes up and you allow yourself to feel, where you honor the space, where you create this space to honor how you're feeling, even just for yourself, That's vulnerable because everything in you is telling you no. If you are sharing that with another, that's incredibly vulnerable. But we have to be able to do that in order to have these experiences. So, come back with me for a moment and let's just kind of take a moment to check in with ourselves. Maybe this video has brought some things up for you. Maybe it's reminded you of some things. But what I'd like you to do right now is just, if you're comfortable, close your eyes for a moment and just take a nice full breath, but not forced. Just a nice full breath in and out through your nose, kind of allowing yourself to breathe in fully. And just notice, where in your body are you feeling? Not even asking what you're feeling, just where are you feeling? If you're sitting down, are you noticing the weight of your body on the surface below you? If your feet are on the floor, are you noticing the connection to the ground? Are your muscles tight or are they relaxed? Can you relax them a little bit more? Maybe loosening up your jaw, releasing your shoulders back and down, allowing your breath to very easily move in and out. Where are you feeling? If the feeling had a color, what would it be? If the feeling had a temperature, what would it be? Connecting within your own body, is not only a great way to connect with the fact that you're feeling or what you might be feeling, but it's also a beautiful way to honor your entire being, because we carry any stress, we carry trauma, we carry pain in our body, in our cells, in our heart. When we can take a few moments and honor what is happening within our body, we're able to begin to kind of chip away at the burden that it has been holding on to your entire life. So I'm just going to take a look at my notes to make sure okay, that I got everything. So that was a lot. And I'm sure that I've probably left some things out, but thank you for being here. So I'm just going to go through and see if I have anything that I can address. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Christina. Hi, Jess. Hi, Denise. Tabby, I think you said hi. A lot of fear. I think that fear, whether it's a conscious fear or not, is the thing that keeps us from, I was going to say from feeling, but truthfully, I think that fear is the thing that keeps us from everything that we desire in our lives. If we're holding ourselves back in some way, it's fear. I believe that almost always there is fear at the heart of that. And the fear could be about a lot of different things, but it's ultimately fear that holds us back from so much in our lives. I know that it did for me in so many ways, and I know that it still does. And sometimes I'm pretty conscious of what that is. I see it when it's happening, and sometimes I can do something about it. But sometimes I'm not conscious of what it is. I just kind of see a pattern of something that's happening there. And that helps me recognize that there is fear behind that. Yeah, dissociation is a way of coping with not feeling. So it is pretty impossible to connect with what we're actually feeling if we're dissociated, which is part of the reason why working on being present, um, like mindfulness, which I know can be difficult for a lot of people, um, working on being present, working on grounding is so important because through those processes, we can begin to feel, when we feel present, we know that we're okay for the most part. We're not living in the future, we're not living in the past. When we are fully present and grounded in this moment, then we can do the work that we need to do. So whether it's truly dissociation on the extreme end where it's a different personality, which obviously has some different caveats to it, but most of us, all of us dissociate on some level. I mean, how many times have you been in your car and gotten to some place and not remembered driving there? Um, but but practicing being really grounded and present on a regular basis, not just when you're feeling dissociative or struggling, but practicing that on a regular basis is really, really important in so many different ways. It's one of the reasons why I start Journey to Wholeness, the digital course, with taking root, which is about becoming really grounded, grounding practices that we can practice all the time, any time of the day, to be very present in our lives. Yes, I hear this so often about crying, that we are taught that crying isn't okay. Um, and particularly if you were punished in some way, whether that was verbally or physically, or even neglected through your tears. We are taught that that's not safe. But if you were actually told things or physically punished when you would cry, that takes a lot more kind of intentional effort, um, in allowing yourself the sense of safety and freedom to allow yourself to cry, because there's other layers that you have to be able to work through, because your body not only has this implicit idea that it's not okay, your body has experienced trauma. Crying and experiencing physical trauma are very closely related. So there are additional layers that you have to work through, which kind of happens organically just by doing the work itself. But there may be some intentional things that have to be done as well in that case. Please don't ever feel guilty for not being able to identify what you're feeling. Like I said, I often cannot identify, like, I know that there's a word. I know that it exists to be able to identify what it is that I'm feeling, but I just can't find it. I can kind of talk around it a little bit. I can maybe use a couple of different words to try to explain it, but not necessarily know exactly. And then sometimes I'll find myself feeling kind of vulnerable, but not exactly sure what is under that. Like what I'm really feeling. Am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling disconnected? Am I feeling afraid? Sometimes I'm not quite sure what it is that I'm actually feeling that is there. I just notice, what I tend to notice for myself is that I'm feeling kind of vulnerable, or maybe a little annoyed, easily annoyed. That sometimes can happen for me too. Um, but it's hard, and there's absolutely nothing to feel guilty about. I would say the majority of our population has difficulty identifying what we're truly feeling. And I have said for so many years, like so many years, that really beginning as children in terms of feeling, like from before kindergarten age, um, to really help us understand what we're feeling. But certainly by the time we are in like third grade, maybe fifth grade, to really help us understand the impact of feeling and the importance of being able to feel what we feel and to not be shut down when we are feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody is in a place of anger and acting out and being hurtful to other people in some way, that we should just allow that, let it happen. Like that's honoring it, because it's not, because it's affecting other people. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But if we, as children, when we felt angry, somebody said, "Hey, what's really going on? I get that you're angry, and it's okay that you're angry, but can you tell me, did somebody hurt your feelings? Are you feeling afraid of something right now?" And they weren't shut down. Oh my God, just imagine the world we would live in. It would be quite different. I have no doubt that it would be quite different if we all had an opportunity for that in our lives as young people. Jamie, how do you feel safe after trauma still living in the same house as someone? If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's honestly incredibly difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but depending on the circumstances, especially if that person is still really unhealthy or abusive, it may be impossible to actually feel safe with that person or with that person in your home. There are things that you can do to help work on feeling safer, but as long as you are, even if you're not living in the same home, but you have a lot of communication with somebody who has been abusive to you, and this could be a whole other topic, um, but it is incredibly difficult to ever feel safe because you never know when the next, so to speak, blow is going to come. And I don't necessarily mean physically, although of course that could be the case. But you can never feel safe because somebody who is abusive or even was abusive, you can't trust on a cellular level that it won't happen again in some way, maybe not physically, but emotionally. So I wish I had a better answer. Or an easier answer, but that is the reality. But like I said, there are things that you can do to help to build your sense of safety within yourself. There are things that you can do to help set boundaries and feel safe that it's okay to set boundaries, that you're worthy of having boundaries. So there are some other things that you can do, but if you're not seeing a therapist, that's definitely something that I would encourage you to work with a therapist on. Because that's a really difficult thing to kind of conceptualize and do on our own. I don't know that it's really all that possible. Have not felt safe for 40 years. I see that a lot. That's not something I'm grateful for myself that I did not have to live that long feeling unsafe. Personally, but I know so many people who have lived well into their 60s and 70s who have never really felt safe either. And that's why part of the reason that I wanted to do this video and why I talk about this stuff, because we learn to live with something and have an expectation, even if it's subconscious. We have an expectation that that's the way it's always going to be. And it doesn't have to be. It truly doesn't. Yes, it takes work. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it takes a lot of time and patience and perseverance. But it can and it does happen. It does. It truly does. And no matter how much you struggle, I do believe that it can happen for you too, whether you're 20 years old, 10 years old, 40 years old, or 70 years old. Um, Therapist said that I need to be angry, but do not feel safe being angry. I might not come back from it. Yeah. Um, I think I think that getting to a place where you can be angry about something can actually be really powerful and healing. Um, I do, and I think that if somebody finds themselves feeling angry in this process, and they're recognizing what that anger is about, and they're expressing that anger in healthy ways, and they're processing that anger, I think that it can be incredibly healing and powerful. But we do need to understand what that anger is really about, because under the anger is hurt or fear. However, I don't believe that we actually need to feel a lot of anger specifically in order to heal. We do need to honor the hurt, the fear, the betrayal, whatever else is associated with the person that we think we need to be angry at. We need to honor whatever is real that is there. But I don't think that you have to get to a place where you actually feel all this anger towards that person. And part of the reason I say that is in my work, I've worked with some people that have not necessarily gotten to a place where they've been really angry, um, and still been able to heal. For me personally, I wouldn't say that I necessarily got angry at my abusers. Um, or even necessarily like really angry about what happened. Um, I did allow myself to honor the hurt, the fear that it caused in so many areas of my life, the impact that it had on me, my conflicting feelings about my perpetrators. Like I did have to do all of that work, but I never really felt much anger specifically about the abuse or about my abusers. I feel the thing that I tend to feel most kind of like anger around is um, is more around injustice as a collective, that that this continues to go on, that it happens at all, that people stand by and don't do anything, that we live in a culture that blames children even for being abused. Like that stuff makes me kind of angry. But the rest of it, for me personally, um, I didn't. So I don't want to say that I'm disagreeing with your therapist or saying that your therapist is wrong. But I also don't want you to get hung up on the idea that you have to get to a place of being angry. Like if you get there, then you get there. What is more important, I believe, is being able to recognize all of the other feelings that you have towards the perpetrator or towards what happened or towards whatever it is you feel like you might need to be angry about. Yes. Phone mom um, says, I don't like to be vulnerable even with a therapist. You're not alone. And I don't mean to say this in a dismissive way. It's certainly not how I'm feeling about it. But I feel like I can pretty honestly say that being vulnerable, especially for anybody that has a trauma history, isn't something that feels good. It's not something that any of us like look forward to. Um, and I think that sometimes being vulnerable with a therapist, typically you're going to be sharing more with a therapist than you would somebody else. Um, when we are vulnerable and we share things that are deep and personal, it's the most vulnerable thing really that we do. And sharing that with somebody who was a stranger, probably not all that long ago in your life, is incredibly vulnerable. So we don't become vulnerable when we get to a place where it feels safe to be vulnerable necessarily. We learn to feel safe in being vulnerable by being vulnerable with the appropriate people, even when it feels really scary. And what I mean by appropriate people is by being mindful of who we're being vulnerable with. A therapist should be a pretty safe bet. And if you don't think it is, then if there's some reason, something that's happened that makes you think it's not, then maybe look for a different therapist. Um, but we need to make sure that we're practicing being vulnerable with people that have maybe shared something vulnerable with us. Maybe you know, do they do they allow us to talk about all different kinds of things? Do they talk about all different kinds of things? Do they only like us if we're making them laugh? Do they talk about other people? If they talk about other people, kind of in a negative or derogatory way, um, that might be an indicator that might not be the person that you want to be really vulnerable with. If that person has already betrayed you, probably not the person that you want to be vulnerable with, unless there's been a lot of healing that's happened in that relationship. Um, but we can't learn to feel safe to be vulnerable until we practice being vulnerable, which I know sucks. But that is the reality, which is also part of the reason why I think it's important that we work with a professional, because in that space, just hopefully inherently, even if you don't necessarily feel completely safe, you may push yourself a little bit more to share than you would with somebody else. What if you have learned to numb out, to numb from feeling by self harm? Self harm is an expression of feeling. Um, so it's kind of a simple answer, but it's not a simple thing to do. You start practicing feeling. So you do some of the things that I've talked about. You allow yourself to go through that cycle, right? The feeling comes up, you allow space for it, and then you kind of work through it. And maybe working through it is a healthy distraction. Maybe working through it is you're feeling something and maybe you don't have the ability to process it or whatever, but instead of just shutting it down, you acknowledge that you're feeling something and you say, okay, I really would like to talk to this person about it, or I don't. uh, I've got a lot that I need to finish. I can't cry right now. Um, so you do something in a healthy way to distract, but it's about practicing. You have to keep practicing it over and over again. And you could also, and obviously this doesn't, it's not black and white. It doesn't work quickly, but you could also kind of just continue to remind yourself that self harm is not actually helping you. That in the bigger picture, it's not helping. And if you're mindful of that without judgment, so you don't judge yourself for doing it, because that could create a whole other set of problems. We don't want you to feel shame for doing it. Um, but if you can say to yourself, I want to learn how to feel. Feeling is not weak. I'm not going to be overcome and not be able to cope at all with feeling. I can do this. And then do something to distract. Maybe you watch funny cat videos, or you call a friend, or get to work on something. But you kind of immediately, instead of self harming, you do something else that can help you get out of that feeling. Healthy distraction is a really, really important coping mechanism, a healthy coping mechanism when we're distracting in an intentional and healthy way. Uh, I'm scared that if I feel too much, the pain will never stop. It will. The, Even if you're not consciously feeling, as I said, your body feels it, right? Your body feels. Even if you're kind of ignoring it, your body is feeling it. Even if you're not consciously aware of what you're feeling or you're pushing it to the back, it's still floating around in your body. Yet, you've coped with it, you're functioning in your life. Beginning to open up to feeling isn't going to be this dam that breaks open where you will be forever flooded. I will say, though, that this can be an important piece of working with a professional because when you're in a session and you have these feelings come up and you're able to process them, then within a session, you can experience that complete cycle. And that is important. And when you experience that full cycle, again, you're retraining your body to recognize that you can handle feeling, that you can have intense emotions and be okay. One of the most healing things about being in retreat together is that we can go from having an incredibly powerfully healing feeling experience in a group setting. We can be in a group together doing some really deep, powerful work where a lot of emotion comes up. And within a couple of hours, we're sitting together having dinner, laughing, or sitting out in the hot tub, listening to music and just chatting about all kinds of things. That's a prolonged experience of feeling, of having that physiological reaction, feeling the feeling, and coming out on the other side. And in that kind of experience, in that retreat type of experience, because we're together all day, every day, we have an opportunity to extend that and not only know that we come out okay, but then from just an hour or two earlier, recognizing that we can go from this intense feeling and need to kind of shut down to having experienced all of that and feeling connected and joyful and happy, and we're laughing. That is such a powerful healing experience. Such a powerful healing experience, which is why something like a retreat where you've got so much time together is such a catalyst for profound healing. But we need to have those experiences. Even if it's a 30-minute or a 60-minute experience, it still goes, it's still incredibly powerful and important for healing. A feeling journal can be really, really helpful. I think that's a great idea. Yes. Tammy is saying that a good trauma or a good therapist, trauma informed, has helped me. Um, and I'm glad. I want to just say, because you identified trauma informed here. So as regular people, we don't necessarily know the difference. There is a difference between trauma informed and an expertise in trauma. Those are actually pretty different things. Trauma informed is important. Like any therapist who ever would even consider treating a trauma survivor should absolutely be trauma informed, without a doubt. Otherwise, they shouldn't be treating trauma survivors. But trauma informed is not the same as being trained and having expertise in trauma. And I'm saying that because and this is part of the difficulty in searching for a therapist. Somebody who's trauma informed does not necessarily have actual training or experience in working with trauma survivors. Well, what they've had training in doesn't mean that they don't also have expertise, but you can call yourself trauma informed because you read a book on trauma, because you went to a 2-day workshop on treating trauma, because you went to a 2-day workshop and got some CEUs on becoming a trauma-informed therapist. And that's not to dismiss your therapist, Tabby. I want to make that clear. Not at all. I'm just saying this in case other people see this and think, okay, trauma-informed. In fact, I've been thinking about doing a video on this, and maybe I will. But whoever you work with, making sure, if you are a childhood trauma survivor, I really encourage people to look for people that have expertise, lots of training on treating trauma survivors, lots of experience in working with childhood trauma survivors, understanding all of the different complexities and nuances to what it means to be a trauma survivor, not just modalities in how to treat trauma survivors. So yes, working with somebody who has a good understanding of trauma is, I think, really, really incredibly important for anybody who's experienced trauma. Thank you, Peter, for your question. Advice for someone who is trying to transition away from feeling expendable. I've seen my abuse as a superpower to truly put others first. I could do a whole video on this as well. So I think understanding why do we do that is important. And very briefly, we do that because we do not believe in our own worthiness, and putting others first gives us a sense that I don't know why I am hearing my phone over here. Sorry. I was doing this on, sorry. I was sharing this on my Facebook page as well, and I guess it ended and started playing back my video. So when we do not believe in our worthiness, when we take care of other people or put other people first, take care of other people's needs, it gives us a sense of value. We feel like this is the thing, this is how we can feel like we matter, that we're good. So understanding that is important. And then I think one of the first things is just being able to start incorporating taking care of yourself. And as you start incorporating taking care of yourself and learning to feel okay about that and good with that, then you can start setting boundaries to not doing that or not only being that for other people. I know that's a very abbreviated answer, but that's kind of the basics of it. But so many people, I would say probably the majority of people that I know for sure who have dysfunctional childhoods often find that we caretake for others in some way or another. And that can look a lot of different ways. But we tend to do that for the same exact reason. Yes, Trina, I agree. Tabby, that's great. Obviously, you feel really safe with that person. And I will also say that how you feel in relationship with your therapist, as long as it's a healthy situation, that is your therapist's responsibility. How you feel in relationship with your therapist actually has the most significant impact on the work that you're doing together. So, beyond anything else, that's what matters most. Because in a healing relationship, it is the relationship that creates the foundation for safety in order to be able to heal. So, that is absolutely paramount. Um, um, I actually don't have my glasses, so I can't actually. I think it's Sue or Slew. I'm not sure. Um, I, you think my book would be a bestseller? Thank you. Have I ever thought about writing a book on CSA or any book? I don't know if you know me, and if you know me, then I think you're trying to get me to say something. And if you don't, I appreciate that. Um, I have thought about it many times. Uh, Actually, just yesterday or today, I was thinking about trying to find somebody to help me, like a ghostwriter or something, to help me really just formulate my. Oh, it was today actually, after that Facebook post. Um, I have thought about it, um, and I continue to think about it, and I keep saying, one day, maybe I will. Um, Setting boundaries makes me feel like I am hurting someone. Ugh, yes, I really could do an entire course on setting boundaries, and actually that's one of the things that came up when I asked people about doing a course. Boundaries was something that came up about that, and it's something that I do have in mind to do something specific around beyond just a video. Um, you're not alone. Let me say that first and foremost, you're definitely not alone, and that's part of the healing that we have to do. Um, I think just as humans, a lot of us struggle with that. Certainly, if you have an abuse history at all, it's a huge issue. And I think generally for women as well, that's obviously a general statement. But as women, we tend to struggle a lot with with boundaries, even recognizing what our own boundaries are. Like I know I didn't know what my own boundaries were. I think most people, especially if you have a trauma history, you don't even know what your boundaries are. So there are a lot of factors that go into um, the struggle with boundaries. So if you're still watching this an hour and 17 minutes in, um, do you think if I were to put a course together, maybe just a small course on boundaries, is that something you might be interested in doing? So it would be something that would have a fee associated with it, probably not a very high fee at all, because it would be kind of a shorter course. But if you would be interested in joining me for a course that would include probably some videos, maybe some meditations, maybe a group that would, I'd probably have to do it on Facebook because I don't have a good platform that could bring us all together where I could do some lives in there for those who are in the course on working on boundaries. I would love to be able to do that. If I had people that were interested in joining me for that, I would absolutely put that together. So if you are listening to this an hour and 17 minutes and you would like for me to create a course on boundaries, let me know in the comments. And I will work on putting something together. I'd love to have you join me, especially for those of you that I don't get to connect with on other platforms. I'd love to get to know you a little bit more deeply in that way. Um, I'm glad that you would read it. When I get upset, it takes days to stop feeling the anxiety. There's a couple reasons why that happens. One is typically it's because you're kind of trying to push something away. It can also happen because when we feel upset, we we go through this whole narrative in our mind, right? These thoughts are just constant. You have thoughts about the fact that you're upset. You have thoughts about what upset you to begin with. You have judgment about the fact that you're upset. There's so many different thoughts, and that continued thought process adds to the anxiety, adds to the upset. So you're not just feeling upset about that first thing that upset you. You continue to feel upset because of all of the thoughts and ideas that are going through your mind continually. So practicing being present can be really helpful with that. But it is a practice, which means it takes a lot of time and practice for it to really become particularly beneficial, like on a regular basis, and for it to become a more natural way of responding. But when we are upset or feeling something pretty intensely for a period of time, it's either because we're pushing it aside well, it's not either, it's usually and. So we may be doing that. If we are doing that, we're also, and even if we're not doing that, we are going through this thought process in our mind that just repeats over and over and over again about that thing. So we need the ability to be able to process that and understand even what it is that's actually upsetting us. Yes, I absolutely right. The boundaries, setting boundaries with people who we feel most vulnerable with are the absolute most difficult boundaries to set and maintain, um, and to not feel guilty about. And I think for a lot of people, um, it takes years sometimes to get to a place where we feel fully kind of comfortable and honor. So to do both of those things can sometimes take years to set those boundaries and maintain those boundaries with people, especially that have been in our lives, that have hurt us or have just really played a significant role in our lives, particularly in a kind of negative way. But we can. And the thing about setting those boundaries that can sometimes be helpful to keep in mind is what you might recognize as a boundary for you now. So sometimes that is, I'm not going to have any communication, or I'm not going to see that person, or I'm not going to talk about this thing or whatever. That may be the boundary that you need now. As you heal, as time goes on, maybe if that person does their own work, you might decide that that boundary is not necessarily what you still need or desire. So your boundaries over time may become fluid. And I think so often in the beginning stages, when we think about setting a boundary, it's like very absolute. Like, okay, if I do this, then it's going to be that way forever. And if we can remind ourselves that we're not making a decision for the rest of our lives, we're making a decision about what's right and best for us now. And if you decide that, probably not going to be a month, but if you decide, depending on what the circumstances are, whether it's a year from now, a few years from now, whatever, that you've done enough healing, that there's been enough space, that person's maybe changed a little bit or whatever, that maybe you recognize that the boundary that you set at one point is not the boundary that you still desire. Now, obviously, you have no choice or control over what that other person chooses. Like maybe they've said, okay, well, screw you. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. That may be the case. But it's often not. That is, I have seen that happen at times for sure, but it's not always the case. So keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be absolute forever can kind of ease some of that fear that might be there. Therapy experienced a rupture and has ended. I'm feeling incredibly let down. This is always such a difficult thing for people to experience and makes it so incredibly hard to even have a desire to try to trust again. I have worked with a lot of people over the years that so much of our work, especially in the beginning, is pretty focused on healing that betrayal. And not necessarily of a rupture, because a rupture can mean a lot of things. But if a therapist, if something happens and you feel that it's not healthy for you to work with that person because there was some sort of betrayal, or if a therapist has said, I can no longer work with you, that can feel like a betrayal too. It may not be. It may actually be in your best interest, depending on the circumstances. Maybe they're not really qualified. Maybe they're not able to give you the kind of help that you actually need and deserve. But it can still feel like a betrayal. But I have spent so much time with clients just processing everything that brings up, because it feels like betrayal. It feels like an abandonment. It certainly creates issues with trust. But please don't give up. I know that it's probably the last thing that you want to do, to try to trust somebody else again. But please, please, please don't give up. And I'm sorry that that happened. Yes, I know a lot of parents or caregivers that if a child didn't stop crying, they would punish them even more. And oh my God, that is so, so damaging to a child's spirit and to a child's ability to feel fully. So damaging. Another person that has had a therapist leave. I know. I know that it's so incredibly painful. And that's part of the reason that I have spent so much time working with clients after they've had that kind of experience, in processing and healing that. And you can. I know in the moment it feels, like I said, like a betrayal. It can feel like abandonment, but it isn't. Well, I don't know those circumstances, your personal experience. But generally speaking, a therapist like leaving a practice or leaving an organization or something like that, it's not a betrayal. And I'm not saying that to minimize how you feel. It's natural for you to feel that way. But being able to work through that to get to a place where you recognize that it wasn't a therapist choosing to abandon you. Being able to get to a place where you can take the good, the healthy aspects of that relationship, the care that that therapist hopefully showed to you. Being able to you can get to a place where you can take that with you and have it mean something for you without feeling the hurt associated with it. When I left my practice here in Arizona, the last practice that I left, because I left my practice in Illinois as well. And I know that I had clients that were devastated by my leaving. And at that time, social media and online stuff wasn't a thing. And I left my agency. I left two agencies, well, three agencies, I guess, in my career. But working with trauma survivors, I left two different agencies, and I know that they were devastated. And this last time, I also gave clients 6 months notice because I knew that there was going to be so much to process. And this last time, it was heartbreaking. And I hope that I can get through it without tears. And I think I've shared this before. But when I left my practice last time, I had a client who I'd been working with, I think maybe for a couple of years, I don't remember exactly now, who had showed up week after week, so vulnerable. She shared so much that I know she had never shared with anybody before. She risked a lot by being vulnerable with me. And when I told her that I was leaving, Uh, um, it was it was devastating to her. She she was not happy. She was certainly hurt. I don't know that I would say that she was angry. Maybe she was, but she didn't necessarily express that. But at one point in our 6 months of processing, it was actually fairly early on in that 6 months, she said that she wished that she had never shared many of the things that she had shared with me. And that broke my heart. I understood why she felt that way. I did. I fully understood it. And I didn't take it personally. It still broke my heart that she felt that way. It broke my heart for me personally, and it broke my heart for her. But of course, she felt that way because she felt like she had risked so much and that I was leaving and that I was taking all that I knew about her with me. And she felt hurt, she felt abandoned, and she felt fearful for what I might do with that information. And we talked about it. We had 6 months, and it might have even been more than 6 months, I don't remember for sure. Um, but we had so much time to talk about and process everything that she felt about my leaving. And I hope that by the end, and if I remember correctly, she didn't really feel that way completely towards the end. But in being able to process that, which is why it's so important to process, if you have felt abandoned by a therapist, it's so important to try again and be able to work through those feelings because the feelings, the reason that we feel that way is because it feels personal. And of course it would. But we need an opportunity to process all of that, to recognize that it's not personal. Even if a therapist does something really wrong that they never should have done, that's not personal either. So, either way, if you have felt hurt or abandoned or betrayed by a therapist and have not been able to work through that with your therapist, it's important to be able to work through that with another therapist so that you can really talk about honoring feelings, so that you can honor everything that's brought up for you. It really is important. So please, if that's ever happened to you, please give yourself the opportunity to talk about that. Don't dismiss your feelings and tell yourself that you should have known better, that you shouldn't feel so upset, that it wasn't a real relationship anyway. It is real. It is absolutely real. It may not be equal in the sense that it's a therapist and you're a client, that it's not a peer relationship, but it is a real relationship. So please make sure that if you have been hurt, that you have the ability to work through that. Um, yeah, even if you don't have a great experience with a therapist, I think there are still things that you can take from that experience. And one of the things might even be what you do or don't want to look for in another therapist. That's a valuable lesson to have. Which is, when you think about having to try a bunch of different therapists, which I know feels daunting and it sucks to have to do that, but you can, if you look at it as an experience of being able to recognize what you do and don't want, or what is or isn't helpful, that's valuable information. So that when you do see somebody again, you kind of know from the first time, maybe even from a phone call, even whether that's the kind of person that you want to work with. Because even a really, really, really great therapist isn't going to be the right therapist for everybody. You might want somebody who is really kind of like, for me, I have always seen my role as a therapist as, in part, being a teacher, helping people understand. I also, in that kind of realm, ask a lot of questions, give a lot of homework, um, because because your life happens outside of that therapy hour. But for some people, that can feel a little too maybe intrusive, uh, a little like it's too much that's being added to their plate. For some people, they want somebody who will just listen, who doesn't provide feedback, who just, and not that there's necessarily anything wrong with this, some people this is beneficial for, who just will kind of reflect back to you the things that you're saying. Sometimes when I'm having like a consultation or a supervision or something like that, that's sometimes a way that I learn most is by somebody reflecting back to me, kind of repeating back to me what I said to them. And when I hear it from them, it it resonates on a different level. So not that one is necessarily better than the other. We need different things, and we need different things at different times as well. So what works for you at one point may not necessarily be what works for you best at another time. Yeah. So I have been on here and talking for over an hour and a half. Clearly, I talk a lot. Don't typically talk this much in session because I do have the other person speak as well. Um, but this has been a long one. And thank you. It says that there are 25 people on here watching right now. So I really appreciate all of you being here, whether you're just popping on or you've been here the entire time. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your energy in this space. So just remember those practices, the things that we need to keep repeating within our lives in order to get to a place where we can feel safe, to feel what we feel and to honor what we feel so that we can heal what is under those feelings. So thank you everybody for being here. Barbara, you are still here. Thank you so much for staying with me. Thank you all for being here. Again, if a mini kind of course working kind of with me, being a part of that is something that appeals to you, working on boundaries, let me know in the comments. And maybe I'll see you there. If you've got any questions or anything, also please feel free to leave them in the comments. And I will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.